Hey everyone. So in this Exponent video, we're going to try something a little bit different. I will be reacting to one of the previous mock interviews that we've hosted online. We'll be picking this video with Celena, and I'll be trying to give some analysis and feedback throughout the video. I hope you enjoy. We're super excited to have you on the show, Celena. And so the mock interview question that we will be doing today will be, how would you design a product around movies for Facebook?
All right,
And so,
product.
yeah, this is a product design question, that interview question. And it's sort of open-ended, but yeah, let's together figure out a product that we would design around movies for Facebook.
Yeah, sounds good. So I think my first question before we get started would be, is this a product you're envisioning existing within the Facebook app, or would this potentially be separate?
You can be as open-ended as you'd like with this question. So yeah, feel free to operate within the Facebook app. The constraint is just that it's something that Facebook itself as a company would launch.
Okay. And one more question. What do you think about hardware versus software? I know Portal is a big bet for Facebook. So do we want to maybe think on a hardware lens as well?
Yeah, that's a great
Not
question.
a literal lens, like hardware direction.
That's a great question. So yeah, the question being, is there a hardware angle here? You can certainly brainstorm in that direction if you'd like to. You're not constrained by that.
Okay.
So one thing that Celena's doing really well here is that she's taking the time to ask clarifying questions. Right off the bat, one huge mistake that we see with most interviewing is that people forget to actually ask these follow-up questions. The interview is a conversation between you and the interviewer. It's not a one-directional speech or proposal. And so what Celena's doing is she's trying to scope out the problem to understand what room she has to play with in this interview. And then next, what she'll do is she'll actually take the time to pause and to collect her thoughts and write down some ideas. This is also super critical, is not only asking the question to understand the problem, but taking the time to actually collect your thoughts so that you can have a well-delivered answer when you're ready to actually give it in the interview.
Awesome. So I think the way that I'd like to go about this, first I'll talk a little bit about Facebook's mission and strategy and why we might be interested in getting into a movie product. From there, I'll do a customer segmentation and prioritize one. And then we'll do a quick brainstorm about potential pain points and needs, prioritize one of those. And then from there, we'll come up with a few solutions and we'll evaluate on impact and maybe a couple other key metrics to pick one. And then I'll walk you through how I think I would do an MVP. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Thanks for mapping it out.
Awesome. So I'm just going to take a quick second to jot down my thoughts here.
Awesome. Take your time. So before we get into the answer, I also want to comment on something that Celena's done really effectively here, which is she's actually laid out a map of how she's going to go about answering this question. It's super, super critical to give your interviewer a sense of, hey, this is my general approach. This would be a perfect time if I didn't agree with that structure, or if I had envisioned a different way of going about this interview question, that I could jump in there and give Celena some guidance or some direction on it. But what's been really effective right now is that she's stated that up front, so I have the right expectations going in, and I sort of have this mental map as I go through the interview with Celena.
All right, so Facebook's mission is to connect the world and bring people closer together and to give people a platform to express themselves about the things that they care about. So it totally makes sense to me as to why we would be interested in moving further into the movie space. I think movies and cinema entertainment in general is something that people have used to connect together since movies were invented. And I think it has really global appeal. It doesn't matter where you're from. Pretty much everyone enjoys getting together with friends and families and broader social communities around movies. And also, I think Facebook is making a lot of big bets in the general video realm. So on Facebook Watch, I know there's a big push to really make Facebook a home for entertainment and not just that social use case, but that you would actually be going to the app specifically to be entertained in your downtime. I know thinking about the platform, Instagram TV also pursuing a similar approach to really provide a hub for all of that types of content. So I think there's the division also between there's creator content and then there's kind of more premium kind of produced content. So movies to me would maybe sit within there. I think we could talk about, what does it mean to be a movie? Does that necessarily predicate it's coming from Hollywood or wherever? Or would we include maybe creator movies and individual movies within that? But yeah, overall, I think that movies is something that's important to think about. There are some competitors in the space. I think Netflix would be the first one that comes to mind, and it's crowded. I mean, Amazon offers movies as well, Hulu. So I want to think about how can we offer something that's really differentiated.
Got it. Yeah.
So what is Celena doing here? She's starting off the interview by actually talking a little bit more about Facebook's mission, how it ties into Facebook's competitive landscape, and just some philosophy around what are movies and how do they contribute to the ecosystem at Facebook. This is what makes an interview stand out as someone from maybe a more senior interviewing perspective, is that they can come in and talk a little bit more high level and bring in some of this knowledge on how this particular product development and this product exercise that we'll do in this interview will tie in to the broader landscape for the company. One super effective tip here is just always mentioning the mission and using that mission to prioritize decisions that are made later down the line in this interview. One other quick thing is that Celena's also done really effectively is she's stated her opinion here. She's also left a pause for me as an interviewer to jump in, to direct her, to give some feedback, avoiding the sort of rambling problem that happens in a lot of interviews as well.
And on that note, like, I suppose, what do you think you'd lean into when you think about the competition to Facebook?
Yeah, so I would say, what is Facebook's strength that these other providers don't have? And that to me is really the social graph. The power of that connection between friends and family enables you to unlock so much more value, both in the watching experience and also in terms of content recommendation. So I would say that would be the angle that I would want to really emphasize here to help us provide something that people would really be excited about.
Awesome. Cool.
So Celena's now answered about competition. This is a follow-up question, and you'll be asked lots of these throughout the interview that'll sort of push you in different directions. In this one, she had a good answer on what the comparative advantage is. Whenever thinking about competitors, what is it that Facebook has that our competitors don't? So when you think about a Netflix, for example, the social graph certainly stands out. What I wish I would have heard here a little bit more is a little bit more of an analysis or conversation around the actual competitors. Like, who are these competitors? What are they doing and what's their strategy? And why would social sort of beat out the other competitors in this particular space? So I think there could have been maybe a richer discussion around the competitors and analyzing them. And really, when talking about competitors in these interviews, it always just starts from understanding. So it's like, let's understand, what is Netflix doing? What are these other players doing? And what do we have an opportunity to do?
So now I'm going to do a quick customer segmentation.
Cool.
All right, so the way that I see it in terms of segmentation for a movie product, I feel like there's two big buckets. On the one hand, there are creators, and on the other hand, there's viewers. So digging a little bit deeper on the creator side, I felt like there were three constituencies. There's a professional creative vertical, which includes kind of major professional, like Hollywood type, major motion films. Then I would say there's kind of professional influencer. I think longer form content you don't necessarily think of as like the same types of influencers on Instagram. So maybe that's more like indie film creators, not quite on the same level as like Hollywood. And then on the viewer side, I thought I could bucket that maybe around usage, like high usage and low usage. So I think, what is our goal here? Is creating a movie product for Facebook. Is there any more specific goal you want me to focus on when I prioritize here? Otherwise, I would probably prioritize on scale or scope and impact. So basically, how many potential users are in here, and which segment do we think might be most impactful to work for?
That sounds like a great goal. You can run with that. Yeah.
Okay. So I think the one that stands out to me would maybe be on the creator side. And I think I missed one of my buckets here, which was a third type of creator, which is an everyday person who might want to create a movie. And I think I want to go in that direction. And here's why. It's specifically around that kind of competitive advantage around the social graph. I feel like you could leverage that to make the creator experience of actually making a movie a more social experience. I haven't fully fleshed out how that might be the case, but to me, that feels like right now when you create content, it's siloed. Either you're alone on your phone or you're like a fully professional person with a whole team. But is there some way that we can unlock that creative experience that's more social?
Mm. Got it. Yeah, super interesting. So you're sort of thinking about like the creative experience being a social one, basically.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, got it.
And I think if we look about the scope of this segmentation, if we consider pretty much any user that has created some sort of video content in the past, and maybe take a percentage of those that have not yet, that might be pulled into the market with this product, I think that actually has a very large scope compared to the other creator sites, which are more kind of concentrated within influencers, or seriously concentrated in like Fox and Sony and those types of places.
Got it. Got it. Makes sense.
So Celena's done something really effective here. First off, we're in the user segmentation part of a product sense or product design interview. Always really, really important to take the time to think about what users are we targeting with this product development. The narrower the user segment and the more specific we get, the better the product can be, because it's more precise targeting those specific sets of users. So Celena runs through a few options. She also asks me again, what are the goals of this product, and are there any goals? But she asks it in a way such that she still has an answer if I don't answer that question. That's something really, really effective in interviews, is saying, hey, this is where I want to go. Let me know if you have an opinion on a different direction, or let me know if there's a different approach that you'd like me to take here. So she's done that really effectively. She's stated it and enumerated the segments. That's always super helpful, saying like, hey, there are 3 segments here. We sort of lost it a little bit toward the end, because then she added another one at the end. And so I think a summary could have been helpful here, where Celena's like, hey, these are the user segments that I picked. Just because it's always kind of hard, especially on video, to hear the enumeration, and it's always helpful to kind of repeat it over and over again. But regardless, feeling excited about the different segments that Celena's come up with. There's definitely some justification for ones that she's sort of biasing towards here, which is always really, really helpful as well. So sort of stating a few ideas and then stating your preference upon those ideas that were just stated. Let's see how she goes from here.
Are you okay with that direction?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'd love to hear maybe just like one quick thing about maybe one of the other customer segments and why you didn't pick that one. You can pick which one. Yeah.
So I thought about the viewer side as well. This is really like a two-sided marketplace to me. You have the creation and then you have the viewing. But I think right now, Facebook Watch already has a pretty good UI in terms of viewing, and I think we can leverage that. And we have really good kind of social features around. If you're watching together, you can comment or react, and you can see the reactions going by. And I think that is a great start. I think that's exciting, but to me, it's much more kind of 0 to 1 unmet need around that social side that I don't feel is being served right now on the creator side.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a great innovative perspective, which is that socialness, naively might come from the viewer's perspective, from someone looking at this problem, but there's actually a way to add a socialness to the creator's perspective. So I'm curious to see what we come up with.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute now to brainstorm some pain points that creators would have around it being maybe not that social in the creative process.
Awesome. Take your time.
Okay, so I've thought of 4 pain points around the whole creation process being not social. So what are some pain points that people experience by creating alone? The first one is wondering, is my idea any good? So is the overall theme that I'm approaching, my script, or just the general pitch of my movie, is that something that is interesting and valuable to people? I think that's something that can be really hard if you're in your own personal mental echo chamber to know. And if you make a movie that no one's interested in, you basically wasted all your time. So that's the first one. The next one is maybe that it's a lonely experience. I think this one especially came to mind given we are in socially distanced times right now,
Yep.
But that I see a ton of people on my feed, recording themselves alone in their various places. So is there some way to make that recording process a little bit more communal? I know a lot of movies are even trying to be recorded via Zoom right now. This interview itself is being recorded via Zoom right now. So is there some way we can make that a more communal experience? The next one was around like, okay, maybe I lack all the skills needed to get my movie to full fruition. So maybe I'm really great at filming, but I'm not good at acting, or maybe I'm great at script writing or sound editing, but not the next step. So is there a way to bring in more people with more skills somehow? And then last one, this was around maybe like, can my audience be bigger? Like as one person, I only have a certain amount of reach in terms of my general population that I can reach out to, of friends and family and my network. So is there an opportunity to leverage more people to bring that bigger audience and make the movie more of a success?
Got it. This is an awesome list. Yeah, what were you sort of thinking are the priorities here with the pain points?
So Celena's now gone into the pain points part of this process. So she's talking about, given a user segment that we want to explore, what are the pain points that that user experiences a lot? Done a super effective job of enumerating them, done a super effective job of diving into each one while also giving space if I wanted to ask follow-up questions to dig into them further. With this part of the process, it's always really, really important to just empathize with the user. What are the actual pain points and problems? Celena brings in some of the more social distancing norms and that sort of thing that makes it more contemporary. And in general, it's always helpful to kind of think about different nuances or perspectives that you might be bringing into the interview that are novel or creative or insightful here.
So I think I really want to measure like impact to goal. So if our goal is, to make a movie product for Facebook that is inherently social, which one do we believe will have the most impact? So I would probably try to see which one is the biggest pain. So looking through, I think there's definitely some immediacy around the loneliness of creating. And I think this one's differentiated too, because most of the ways that individual people create video for social media is with like the front facing cam, like is in itself a lonely experience. So that one to me feels highly impactful to this goal. Let me see. And I think another one that stands out is like, can my audience be bigger? I think there actually might be an opportunity to tie those two together. If you're doing this in a more social way, because there may be as an endpoint that the audience would be magnified as a result.
Totally. Yeah, I think I really thought the lonely experience one was interesting because it's kind of a not thought about problem, but definitely true. And yeah, particularly presently a problem for this day. So yeah, I'm curious about that one.
I think it's interesting because it's almost inherent in the workflow today of how video exists. So that to me signals that there's maybe a new way to think about it that could be really additive.
Definitely.
To mention one that I didn't pick, so lacking skills, I think that's an interesting one that to me feels a little bit outside of Facebook's wheelhouse. I would expect that that's more on the like Final Cut Pro, maybe Reddit boards or wherever creatives go to meet up and collaborate together. And I think that probably it would be better served to focus more on that in essence of socialness in itself.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So now Celena's prioritizing these pain points so that we can come up with a product design that we're happy with later. One thing that Celena's doing really effectively is she's prioritizing against the goal that we stated in the beginning of the problem. It's always really effective to bring that back into the problem and to rethink that. What's also effective is that it's clear Celena's not using a framework. She's not saying, hey, this is my analysis or my pro-con list or anything like that. She's making persuasive arguments for why we should consider one of these pain points or the other. One is a competitive argument, another is maybe a goal-based argument. And these are really, really effective to have a rich conversation. You can see that there was even a little bit of riffing between me and Celena in this interview. The interviewer in this room is excited to have a rich, creative, fun conversation with you. So it's really effective to actually have this thoughtful dialogue about it and kind of bounce back and forth with your interviewer and have that energy. That's something that great product managers are always really great at as well on product teams.
So we're going to focus on this I'm lonely, and maybe we'll see if the audience can be broadened as a result. But really the main pain point is the loneliness here. Okay, so I will take a minute now to brainstorm some solutions for this.
Okay.
Okay, so I've thought of 3 potential solutions here. The first one is something we could probably MVP via groups, but this would be around creating creative groups for moral support kind of throughout the movie process. So you could join this particular subset and let people know about your general project timeline, and they could kind of check in with you and give you kudos and be a sounding board for ideas as you move on. And I could see this being really beneficial to also have like networking between creatives, so that if you're part of this group, then you can more easily work together in the future and kind of percolate from the hive mind of creative ideas. The next idea I had was this new feature for Portal called Portal Audience. So this would be a way to really quickly get viewers earlier on in the creative process. So if you're recording via Portal, people could just join in and drop in and see what you're up to, and you could talk to them. But it would be kind of like a one-to-many. I think there's some privacy concerns there. We could talk about how we can set up those features, but that could be a fun way to kind of get more people in your creative room. And the last idea, so this one is a little bit out there, but I think there's an opportunity to maybe like create a movie together through Facebook. So I got this idea through like the moments that you can share like with your friends when it's your friendversary, and you can create a movie of your friendship. So what if we went even a step further with that and we made it so that you could create an actual recording movie with your friends and film each scene and kind of hand it off. So you could even do it asynchronously and kind of slowly create a movie over time. I'm thinking even further about this now. Maybe it could be like, you know, the movie Boyhood, how they kind of record little snippets, like, I don't know if it's a minute a day, but just over his whole life. So maybe you could make the video of your life on Facebook. I think that would align really well with the rest of the platform having your memories over time.
Yeah, super interesting. And so for that last idea, like, is sort of, I would love to hear a little bit more kind of what you're imagining, and I guess also hearing your preference on which one you want to dive into and which one sounds exciting in terms of moving forward.
I think
so. Now Celena is coming up with solutions to the pain points. This is always one of the more creative and fun and brainstormy parts of the product management interviews, and personally one of my favorites, because we're coming up with a ton of different ideas that we think could solve this problem. So a couple of things that Celena's done really effectively here. She's mentioned problems and then also mentioned a little bit of caveats. She had that point about privacy concerns and sort of flagging it or bookmarking it for a later discussion in case that's something that I was concerned about and in case we go through that idea. She's also done something really effective here by saying, hey, this one's really out there. This is kind of a crazy idea, but, and sort of caveating that and giving a sense to the interviewer that, hey, I know this idea is out there, but here's an idea that shows that I can kind of think about those moonshot ideas or think about these kind of really pie in the sky ideas that could be really exciting visions that we then maybe make small steps towards in this interview. So I think she's done a really effective job with that. And then lastly, I just think Celena's showing clear passion and enthusiasm, especially for that last idea, which we'll dig into a little bit deeper in the rest of this interview.
I think I am excited about this last one as I'm thinking about it more. I think really it aligns well, both on the social experience with being able to create something together, but also in Facebook's bread and butter, which is, you know, kind of collecting memories and moments between you and your friends and family. So I think that's the one I want to go with. I think, you know, to put metrics around it, it would be like impact. I might think about effort as well. I think this one is probably a little higher effort than creating groups for moral support, for example. But I think the impact would be super, super high on making movies a more inclusive, social, creative process, and maybe potentially impact a lot of people's lives for the better if they are able to kind of chronicle their life over time, and everyone could have their own personal movie. That could be very rewarding and special.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there's a lot of interesting thought there, just like even the statement you just said about everyone having their own personal movie and like what that even means for people and how they view their lives. But yeah, I'm curious, like, yeah, tell me a little bit more about kind of what you're imagining in this experience. And I would love to just maybe poke out some of the features or hear a little bit about what the high priority features would be.
Yeah.
So before we go into feature development and picking features, there is something interesting about this solution, right? It's not quite what you might think a movie would be necessarily. When I think about movies, I would think about movies as more cinematic experiences or directed experiences. And so I can imagine a viewer watching this or an interviewer watching this being like, hey, that's not exactly what I asked. That's not the direction I want to go in. I was sort of happy with this direction because it sort of expands the definition of what a movie is, and it feels creative and exciting. And so I want to make sure you as a viewer know that when you're going through these interviews, it's okay to kind of veer off the path or go into a pocket of the question that maybe didn't seem like the original intent of the interview, mostly because this process is a creative one. It's a back and forth. The interviewer is there not to assess if you can follow the deadline or follow the guidelines of sort of the exact parameters of the question, but it's more about creating something together in this interview. And that's what makes these interviews so fun. So let's see where Celena goes with that particular direction.
Absolutely. So I think this would be probably, it could live under creating a video post in the near term, and it could ask you like, oh, do you want to add this to your movie? So actually maybe it could be super, super lean whenever you're like sharing a story or something. Instead of kind of collecting it to memories, you could say, do you want to add this to your movie? And that could be the first discovery point. And then it could explain like, yeah, you know, it's collecting movie over the course of your life. I think there could be a separate entry point within Facebook Watch. If you're like, I'm a more real deal video creator and I'm going to have my army of socially distant creators to make this amazing thriller, I don't know. And so then you could go to Watch specifically. And I think then there would be probably some sort of like of the video pop up and you could hit record. There probably need to be some really basic editing, just probably trimming on the ends initially. I don't think we need to get too far into kind of more mechanics of effects and sound editing at the initial point. And then there's probably something of like tagging people in the project. So you could probably add people in and remove them. I could see if someone's just doing a little moment, maybe you don't want them in there the whole time. And then there's somewhere you'd need a database to store all of these movies. If this is longer form content, then there's definitely storage that we need to think about. And then maybe it's like, do you have like a publish versus still editing mode? I think definitely. So there probably needs to be some sort of like my library of existing in process movies and ones that are already published.
Definitely. I'm curious, like, so, you know, and maybe the answer sort of is baked into my question, but YouTube is obviously a place also for people to upload and brainstorm and create some of these like maybe lower fidelity or sort of like lighter weight videos and movie experiences. So Facebook's like, in this world that Facebook is creating, like, how will you really leverage some of the social stuff to really differentiate it from YouTube?
Yeah, I think it's really about like tagging other people to be able to add one of their videos to your life movie or your thriller. I think both can work. And yeah, maybe you can even have people as contributors over time. So I think with YouTube, right, you finish something, you upload it, that's it. Maybe there's a little bit of editing you can do versus this is kind of a continuous ongoing project that again can be asynchronous, that you can tag your friends and do it later in little chunks that measure up to something really big and meaningful.
Totally. Yeah, it sounds like we're almost inventing a new type of content in general, like that doesn't really exist right now. But like, what if we can make these movie experiences that were both living and social in the way that they were created and added to?
Yeah, so. I love that. Living is the exact word.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, for you also, like, so what are some worries that you have about this? Like,
so before we get into the worries and we talk a little bit more about how Celena might think about this, I would say this part of the interview felt the most weak to me when we actually analyze it. Celena started off by stating a few different parts or features of this problem, but it didn't really come with a structure at all. It just sort of felt like it was like listing a bunch of ideas. That could have been effective if Celena had said something like, hey, I'm going to brainstorm some ideas. I'm just going to throw things against the wall. We're going to see what sticks, and then I'll pick the ones that I think are the most favorite. That would have been an effective way to go about that, and not actually adding that much more structure to it, but just sort of allowing her to have the space to play and to come up with these ideas. But since we didn't do that, as an interviewer, I felt a little lost in where we were going with it and what the most important features were. And It is a very big problem, so it's hard to pick which single feature would be the most important. What I wish Celena might have done is, in addition to maybe the brainstorm part of it, is again bring up the goals of the product and the feature and tie it back there. So it's like, hey, our goal is to reduce loneliness in the process, or Facebook's mission is this, and that's how we'll think about which features are the most critical to launch and how we might go about launching it. So I definitely taking the time also to come up with these ideas and to think through the structure and to think about answering it. This is one of the parts of the interview where Celena didn't pause, and I think it would have been even more effective had she done that. But let's see how she talks about some of the worries and fleshes that out a little bit more.
Obviously this is a new type of content. It could be a lot of work, but like, what are some of the key issues that you're worried about when thinking about moving in this direction or designing in this direction?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is privacy. So if you are chronicling someone's entire life, I think, there's a lot of questions there, and maybe someone's okay with it when they start, but then they're 40 and they're no longer okay with it. So how do we manage that? I think there's another one around like retention. So if this is something that you're not posting for years, then the value to the user, there's a huge peak in value when you post it. There's definitely value through chronicling it, but can we make sure that people still stay engaged and excited if they're not posting it till that point? Do they want to post it in chapters? Is this something that we want to make visible sooner? I think that's definitely something I'd want to experiment with pretty early on to understand.
Totally. That makes sense. Yeah, I guess I'm also curious. So yeah, obviously privacy will be important because you might not want to show everyone your life story. You might want to show parts of it, things like that. Yeah, so I'm curious, I guess, like, as a last maybe follow-up question, like, yeah, what metrics would you look at here to see or evaluate the success of this product?
So we'll talk about metrics in just a second. And I want to talk a little bit more about the solution and the space we're talking about. I think the privacy conversation is really an important one. It's relevant to Facebook in general. Facebook definitely has these problems. Celena could have brought in that a little bit more of like, Facebook's mission around privacy or Facebook's perspective around privacy is always putting the users first. Therefore, we should really, really think about that as we build this product. But again, the solution that we've gotten to isn't super precise or clear, and it would have been helpful at this point, or maybe a little bit earlier in this interview, to just clarify, like, this is your personal movie. We're making a personal movie product for Facebook. Even adding that tagline and repeating it a couple of times can be really effective to give clarity around what the solution actually is, because Celena had so much great thought up until this point, and we really want to crystallize that around something that's really clear and easy. So one tip to kind of demonstrate this product vision at this point in the interview is really just bring in that tagline or bring in this little blurb or sort of snippet of what the actual product that we're designing is. And then it doesn't matter so much as what the exact details of it are, as long as we get the basics down. We're going to compile all these photos and video content to make a personal movie for everyone, a living movie for everyone. And that sort of has the gravitas and clarity of it that would help with answering some of these questions, and we tie it back to the mission again. But anyways, we'll talk now about metrics, which is always a really important part of this, is let's say we launch something like this, what would it actually look like, and how would we actually measure success?
And yeah, feel free to add other pieces also, by the way, if there are other points you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to as we start to wrap up the interview.
Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of metrics, there definitely depends on like what stage. If this is at launch, I would be concerned more tactically, like, is this working? Are people able to use these features? Versus more downstream, I'd be interested in engagement around the actual posts themselves. I think that does, again, call to question, like, when are people posting? If we're posting more in chapters, then we can test engagement sooner. I think retention is another one. So I think my first metric would probably be like click through and maybe number of installments added on average per user. I probably want to look at a monthly number if this is something that I wouldn't expect people to do it necessarily every day, but probably a couple times a month if that's really the use case we're going to. I probably also want to look at the average length of an installment. I think that has important implications on the storage side, which is more of an infrastructure thing, but I think that's important to consider. And I probably also want to look at the average number of friends included in a creation process. I think a key hypothesis here is this isn't solo creating. This is a social living creator experience. So I would want to definitely validate that by seeing additional people added. I don't know what the sweet spot is there, but definitely more than one person. Yeah, and on the retention side, I'd probably want to look at the 2-month retention for the feature. So of the users who added something a month ago, are they still adding 30 days later, basically?
Got it. Super helpful. Cool. Well, is there other pieces to this interview that we didn't get to touch on, or pieces you wanted to add or clarify or hone in on before we start to wrap it up?
I guess maybe there's something around discovery. So I mentioned maybe we could put that in stories.
So before we talk about the final part of the interview where Celena sort of adds some other thoughts, I do want to mention about the metrics discussion. I think Celena did a really great job of mentioning specific metrics. What I was missing is a bucket of metrics that she was looking for. And I think the bucket that she's mentioning in this specific case was just engagement. She was mentioning things like click-through rate or monthly ads to this piece of content. But really, I think it's ultimately an engagement thing. And so when you as a viewer are looking through this, when you as an interviewer are going through this, just always think about that user funnel and think about like, okay, where in the funnel do we want to actually improve these metrics? And so in this case, I do think an engagement metric would be great. Do people actually engage with this? Do they interact with it? I would also maybe think a little bit about retention. So beyond just do they click on it, do the users that click on it stay with it? Especially if this is a product that sort of requires people to stay with it over a long period of time. After you kind of mention these engagement and retention metrics, it's not so important what the actual metrics are. You can just mention a few ways to measure it. So she could say, okay, hey, I want to focus on engagement. I would look at CTR potentially. I would look at this potentially and that potentially. But ultimately what I'm measuring, the goal of my metric here, or why I'm measuring this metric, is to understand engagement. And it's always really effective to kind of mention the goal and sort of these higher buckets of metrics as you talk about them. But yeah, let's see how Celena talks about discovery now.
As a first point, but I do want it to be differentiated. So do we do a big splash? Like, do we even launch a movie like Boyhood to promote this? Or how do we let people know that this is a new, special, different way of chronicling your life and of creating video that is social and living? I think there's an opportunity to make a really big splash to actually do a video, even if that's like a year. So yeah, I would be considering that rollout plan, or maybe we just want to focus on a particular country and tell the story of that country and then use that to gain momentum.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, it sounds like there's a couple angles here also about like, is it your own living story, or is it, like, and maybe really tapping into that desire to chronicle one's life. But then also maybe just like this creative energy too, and sort of like which direction it goes would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. I do think there's two user segments. I think there's the one which is chronicling your life, and there's the other one which is more like, I'm an indie film producer.
Right.
This new type of producing.
I guess, yeah, like a last question maybe before we close would be like, which one of those two user populations would you prioritize?
I think the more general user, as we talked about it, it really sounded to me like a big opportunity that could impact any everyday person. And so I think the scope is much larger. I think that's great if indie film producers can get value out of that same feature set. And maybe long-term, we would want to put some more professional, additional advanced features on there. But I think, again, thinking about the wheelhouse of Facebook is really for the everyday civilian. It's not necessarily an artistic product, though we do have creator content on there. So I would want to design for the everyday person.
All right, so the interview is over. Celena did an excellent job. I want to talk a little bit about that last ending piece, and then we'll just recap the full interview. So whenever your interviewer sort of gives you an opportunity to say anything, which is sort of what I did, is a huge lob, and take advantage of it. This is an opportunity to share anything that you missed in the interview, anything that you wish you had stated more, to dive deeper on an area you're really excited about and passionate about, or honestly, just to create space to develop that connection with your interviewer. Celena did a great job of kind of mentioning a couple pieces that she thought were really important. She even maybe revised or talked a little bit more about the user segmentation. As you go through the problem, of course, you're going to come up with different nuances to it and maybe want to slightly modify the way that you went about the problem. So take the time at the end, if your interviewer gives that to you, to create space for what you think is important. Overall, I think this was a super effective interview. This would definitely be a strong hire. Celena has done an excellent job of thinking about the problem, breaking down the problem really concretely. I think the area that we could have improved is in the solution space. When Celena was coming up with solutions, felt a little bit like we maybe didn't have time, or we weren't able to come up with concrete ideas in that space, and was a little more jumbled than the rest of the interview. So it kind of stood out there. However, overall, Celena did a great job of tying in the goals, driving us to a solution that was creative, interesting, thoughtful, and having a really great structure throughout the interview. So ultimately, this was an awesome interview, and Celena totally crushed it. For those of you watching, I hope this was a helpful reaction or analysis video to this interview video. Please do let me know if it was valuable by letting us know in our private Slack channel, or just liking this video at the bottom of the lesson that it's featured in. And as always, good luck with your upcoming interviews.